Hi guys, welcome back. This is week 39 at Project Life. Now last week I shared with you the process of how I put together my Citrus Twist Mega Kits. If you haven't seen that video I will link it up here, but today I'm actually going to use one. So I decided that with the photos that I had going this week, I wanted to use the more kind of bright, warm kind of toned kit that I put together. So that is what I'm going to work with. Now I started off by grabbing out a couple of the 3x4 cards. I decided to go sort of light and bright this week. So I've also added in a couple of just bits of white cards. So I've got a 4x6 at the top for my title card, and I've added one 3x4 card because I think I want to do a little bit of repeat stamping. And so I'm only looking for one pattern paper for my 4x6 down the bottom, and I decided to tie in that kind of teal 3x4 card by using this teal paper down the bottom here. So everything's, despite me using the kind of brighter, warm-toned kit, I'm actually ending up going sort of light and cool-toned for now. I am going to change that as I start going through here and adding some more embellishments. I'm going to want to balance things up a little bit. Now I'm starting by going through all of these die cuts, and because there are so many in this kit, like I haven't separated them into little pieces, I'm just whipping through them, pulling out things that I may or may not use, just so that I have a smaller selection to work with rather than this huge pile. And I definitely don't end up using all of the ones that I've pulled out, but it at least gives me a starting point. Now the other thing that I've got in this kit is a whole bunch of stamp sets to work with, and I'm definitely going to use pretty much most of them. I did put aside the ones that sort of didn't apply. There was a kind of reading themed one and those sorts of things. There's no photos in here that are going to be relevant for that, so I just put those aside. Now I was going to start working on my 3x4 card, but what I decided to do was work on my title card first, because that's really going to give me the kind of colors that I want to use throughout the rest of my layout. So this is where I'm starting with. I've picked out a few of the papers that were kind of scraps in the kit, and I've also picked out a few of the whole papers, and I have trimmed those down to 4x6, so the pieces that I don't use for this title card are still going to be usable in some way, shape or form. And you can see here I'm just using my scissors to kind of randomly cut out some shapes. Now this title card is totally inspired by Nyala from Paper Buttons Loves over on Instagram. Last week, the week before last, she shared sort of a layered paper embellishment that I just fell in love with. And last week with my patrons, I did do a traveler's notebook layout that was kind of inspired by that. But I'm still feeling that kind of scrappy paper vibe. And so I'm going to translate this down into a 4x6 card today. And spoiler alert, I love how this turns out. So I will link her post down below so that you can see what I'm talking about. It's such a fun, I think hers was a December themed one, but so easily translatable to any other theme that you have going. So you can see I've got all my little scrappy bits of paper. I just added a tiny bit of adhesive onto the card, and then I'm layering up all of these pieces, trying to keep them a little bit balanced color-wise, but you can see I've got a whole lot of colors on there. And then I just went and stitched those all down with my sewing machine. Now my sewing machine does have black thread in there because October, Halloween, and I didn't feel like changing that out, so I just left it black. I added my week title on top of that line of stitching, so it kind of is like a guideline for keeping things super straight, and I'm just stamping my date stamp directly onto the white card underneath those scrappy bits of paper. Now you could totally leave it like this. I think it's pretty enough, but I am going to add a few little embellishments because Nyala's embellishments were filled with chipboard and all sorts of fun puffy stickers, so I'm going to do the exact same thing. I've added a little chipboard arrow and a puffy sticker sentiment, and I'm also going to add a few of these little enamel dots because they're my favorite. I love them, so I'm going to add a few, and it gives me all sorts of bright pops of color that I'm going to be able to use throughout the rest of my spread here. So title card all done. You can see the kind of colors that I'm going to need to add into this spread now, and a lot of that is going to include some pinks and some warmer kind of coral tones. So that's where I'm starting with for this card. I'm going to do some repeat stamping, and there were multiple stamp sets in this kit that had something to do with coffee. I know, that's not a shock. What I've ended up choosing is kind of one of these brick stamps, so it's got an outline, the word coffee in the middle, and I'm just stamping that all the way up my 3x4 card in some Catherine Pooler ink. I think the color's Bellini. It's one of my favorite sort of corally peaches. Super easy, fun technique. I just kept everything straight and built it kind of a pattern, and it gives me that really soft peach color that I can then add my photo to. Now, I did pull out a couple of die cuts when I was going through that pack, sort of coffee related ones, weekend related ones. The tag sort of ticket one was far too light to go onto this card. It kind of just got lost in the background. So we used the little circle one, and that works nicely because it kind of covers up a really busy area of my photo, and I just love the look of it a bit simpler like that. But I did also add a tiny little stamp that says "in my cup," and it fit perfectly on top of my coffee. Now this photo with Lil on our walk, super easy. I'm just going to add that in. It sort of accidentally ended up perfectly sized to fit on this card. And I'm going to add that little ticket that says walking, because that's what we were doing. And that's that as far as that card is all done. Now for my journaling, I just ran that card straight through my typewriter. I used my pink typecast ribbon on that one, and then added a tiny little puffy sticker to the bottom, and that's that middle row of my spread all done. Now I really loved this orange tab here, but it kind of didn't fit in, and neither did the word sigh. I liked it, but it just felt like it had kind of a negative connotation, and that's not really what this photo was about, so I decided just to leave that. I was kind of looking to add a little bit more black onto there, but I'm going to do that in a different way in just 1 second. So I'm adding down my photos, and I'm going to add a couple of these really beautiful florals. I love these ones from Citrus Twist. They're so gorgeous. I'm going to add both of them to my photo. And then this little sentiment about self-care, but what I want to do is tuck it underneath one of the leaves. It didn't quite have enough of a gap, so I just used my scissors just to snip a wee piece in between those leaves, which means that I can tuck that sentiment up there just a little bit further. Now, as far as adding black into here goes, what I'm going to do is stamp a sentiment. Now, the one I wanted to use actually ended up being too long. I was kind of alternating between two, and my first preference just wasn't going to fit. So I'm going to use that elsewhere, and I'm going to use my second choice here, which actually works out better because it's another one of those boxed frames, and so it sort of ties in nicely with that coffee stamping, but also I can stamp that onto a white background, and it gives me a little bit extra, well, I'm going to say color, but difference onto that side rather than stamping it onto the background. To add in a little bit more of those warmer colors, I added a few more little enamel dots, sort of my trick on this layout for getting some of those oranges in there without adding too much sort of orange. The other thing I'm going to do here is add a little bit of that kind of orangey corally peach color with my sentiment stamp on this photo of my cat Mel. This stamp set had this kind of tab border on it, and you can see I've stamped that onto the back of the paper because what I want to do is just use it as a template to fussy cut out the kind of tabbed shape. I wanted the tab to be on the left though, so that's why I stamped it onto the back so that when I flip it over, the tab is on the right side. Well, the left side. The right side that I wanted. Then I stamped my sentiment, and I'm just going to trim off the kind of excess paper there. Now it sort of looked a little bit lonely on its own, so what I'm going to end up doing is using the piece that I've already created to trace a second piece. I'm going to make this just slightly longer and slightly taller, and then I can add that in behind my original piece, and it kind of adds that extra layer that makes it look like a tabbed file. I'm going to tuck those both just straight onto the bottom right hand corner, and that way it doesn't look like it's got a weird sort of ending on the right hand side. Again, I'm going to add a couple of enamel dots. This time I'm adding sort of the other colors, so I've got a little teal and some yellow, and I've got one photo left to do on here, and this is the photo that I'm going to just stamp directly onto. This was the sentiment that I wanted to use on that other photo, so I'm going to stamp this. It fit nicely down the bottom here, but it did kind of feel like there was that big gap, sort of big space in my photo on the left hand side. So what I'm going to do is just stack up a few other sentiments on top of there as well. Lots of the stamp sets that I've got in this mega kit all have that same kind of theme, that sort of weekend self-care, being in this moment sort of thing, and that all worked really well with the photo of my live stream. Now I'm just stamping directly onto the photo. I'm using Memento Tuxedo black ink. It stamps perfectly on my photos because I print at home using Canon Photo Glossy 2. The paper is everything when it comes to stamping onto photos. So it's just another reason why I love printing at home. Now I was going to keep adding, but I thought 3 was enough, so I've left it as is. I'm just going to add another one of those puffy hearts on there, and that is this layout all done. So you can see how simple it is to put together a page when you've got a mega kit just filled with stuff that you love. It's the whole reason I love making these kits. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you want to keep watching, there are a couple more videos on screen. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Bye guys.